Donald Trump and Elon Musk end their ceasefire. But if we can appreciate one thing about their time together, it's that DOGE made Bono cry. Blaze News, The Mandate, starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage here with our editor-in-chief, Matthew Peterson.
Hey.
And our D.C. correspondent, Chris Bedford. Gentlemen, sad to say, Pride Month has come to an end. The calendar has turned over. We are now in July. We have officially made it through Pride Month.
Wow, I feel as if it didn't happen this year. Maybe because I ignored it, and also we think, right? Chris, we published on this. It's diminishing.
It is diminishing for all except for Jaguar, who had an epically bad sales month this month. You might remember that they put out that ad about how they're erasing everything and redoing everything. It was it was weirder than a Smashing Pumpkins music video. It was stranger than a Marilyn Manson music video. Trent Reznor has not made creepier music than this. And it was nothing but androgynous, strange people cavorting in dresses. There was no cars in the ad, and it was universally panned. They were late to this game, but then they got rid of all the old Jaguars, like the amazing stuff.
Yes.
And this year, in all of Europe, they sold less than 50 cars this month, excuse me. Now compare that to almost 1,700 in April of last year. And turns out, go woke, go broke.
Yeah, we had a few people on the show to talk about that one, and it was fascinating at the time because, like you said, they were late to the party, and it's also the exact opposite of their brand. I mean, really, everything about Jaguar was refuted. It was rejected in that advertisement. So we are starting to see some real returns. I mean, the wokeness is still present and accounted for, but that's a symbol, I think, of hopefully the end of all this nonsense.
My grandfather picked up the CEO of British Airways decades ago on the tarmac at his private jet. My grandfather pulls up in a Mercedes. CEO is probably an RAF veteran or a military veteran for sure. And they had a good business transaction. He dropped him off at the end. And at the end of the meeting, as he was getting out of the car, he said, do me a favor, old boy, and buy yourself a Jag. Send me the bill.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think you would hear that again. They used to be synonymous with British engineering, and now it's gay.
Yeah, well, the UK has had its hard times lately, and the hilarious thing about that is, like, who do you think buys Jaguars? I mean, what does it stand for? It was really remarkable in a complete self-destruct. But the other big companies have just kind of slowly walked back. Mm-hmm. You see them slowly step away, but sadly, the regime is still in place of wokeness in these companies. So we'll see how that goes. A lot more to come there, I think.
Well, Elon Musk, he doesn't have a woke car company, but our favorite bromance, you guys, things are not going well. The feud between Donald Trump and Elon Musk is actually heating up. And earlier today, Donald Trump was asked if he would consider deporting Musk. Watch.
I don't know. I think we'll have to take a look. We might have to put DOGE on Elon. You know what DOGE is? DOGE is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible? He gets a lot of subsidies, Peter. But Elon's very upset that the EV mandate is going to be terminated. And you know what? When you look at it, not everybody wants an electric car. I don't want an electric car. I want to have maybe gasoline, maybe electric, maybe a hybrid, maybe someday a hydrogen. If you have a hydrogen car, it has one problem. It blows up, So I'm going to give that one to Peter. I'm going to let Peter test it out.
All right, Elon was out on X earlier today, and he was like, you know what? Get rid of the EV mandate. I don't care, right? I know that not everybody wants this, but Matt, when we look at this, like, there's a feud going on now, right? This has raised to a level where we actually have to talk about what is going on right now with the Republican Party.
Yeah, this is a really important split. Obviously, when someone spends that amount of money. Anything over $10 million is significant. Never mind over $100 million on a campaign. Pledges that money, richest man in the world, and also I want to get into later today the symbol that Musk stands for. Right, the last American industrialist. Really, that's important stuff. So this rift is real, and we want to unpack it today. And we have to unpack more rifts within the coalition because we want a big, beautiful coalition, just like everyone in the audience. And it's important that everyone understands what exactly is going on here. And I would say on the Trump ledger, I think the EV mandate is the weakest argument against Elon because he has consistently, at least publicly, said, it's fine. That's not the big deal. There's some other stuff going on behind the scenes, I think, that we need to get into when it comes to Elon. And I know that Chris has pronounced opinions on Elon's political, knowledge. He may be weakest when it comes to politics and playing the game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the guy's a genius. The guy's brilliant. He is the last American industrialist. He's the guy in tech who's not just giving us a newer, smaller iPhone or another charger you have to replace all of your chargers with. He's the guy out there who's launching rocket ships into space and landing them back on the Earth again. It's incredibly impressive stuff. But it's hard to teach the richest man in the world who's answers to seemingly no one and isn't even religious, a little bit of humility, a little bit of prudence. And I'm really hopeful that the political game is going to teach him some of that because he is not the first libertarian billionaire to enter politics and become disillusioned very quickly. I was in the room in 2011 when Charles Koch said, "We're here for the long haul. We're done being in outside politics and libertarianism where David Koch ran against Reagan and Carter in 1980 and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and got like 1.1% of the vote. The Libertarian Party has consistently never beaten 3.3%, I think, was Gary Johnson's 2016. And that was by far a high mark by a lot. There's not really a path right now for a third party, especially right now. And this sort of frustration is not abnormal. When Charles Koch came back around and said, we're here to remake the Republican Party into a more free market party that's more in alignment with our principles, he said specifically, I know this is going to be a difficult time. I know it's going to take years. I know there will be setbacks. I know that there will be disappointments, but we are here for the long haul. And then within 5 years, he took his money home and left. And behind him, he left a huge amount of people who were angry. And at the end of the day, he can come back around with millions, or his institute or his foundation can come back around with millions of dollars. But people know that his name can no longer be trusted, whether it was just unreliability or openly being duplicitous. Those sort of things really matter. That's a lot of currency your reputation has in politics in a free system. So for Musk to be unreliable here or to attack close allies because they have over disagreements so publicly is a dangerous move politically. And I know that there's a certain temptation amongst those who are very intelligent and very wealthy and very successful in other fields to come to Washington and tell them, like, look, politicians, I'm here. I'm here to save the day. I'm going to make it all better. You guys are waiting for my expertise, right? Everybody wants to get rid of this waste and corruption and bloat and inefficiency. And it turns out they actually don't. That's a real problem with American politics, but it can be frustrating for people who come in from out of town and are experts in other fields, and they have to kind of learn to get along in order to really have a say. Compare that with George Soros, who's significantly less wealthy than some of these people, but has used that money over the years unrelentingly to help shape American cities into downfall, to help shape the Democratic Party into the image that he wants, to transform Western democracies in a really insidious way. And he did that just through backing financially, unrelenting pressure, and taking setbacks. There's no point where a Democratic nominee got in charge or a Democratic governor showed up or he just decided to take his ball home. He continued, and he made friends and he made allies. That's why at his son's faux wedding on Long Island, there were so many members of the Democratic aristocracy there, even through a rainstorm and all of that ridiculous pomp, because they have close allies in the Democratic Party. And these are things that are built up over years and with trust and with continued giving. You can't just come in like a whirlwind, not get your way, and go back to your room. And I still don't see a lot of animus from Donald Trump here. He's such a practiced interviewer these days that really the only way to get him to make news, and you ask him to ask him a question, is to get him to say something like, "We'll see, we'll see." So you say something like, "Hey, should we catapult Nancy Pelosi into the sun? Have you thought about that?" He'll say, "We'll take a look at it." But he's not going to give you any actual news.
Chris, I want to go through.
Here.
I want to volunteer to be George Soros level poor. That's what I want. I'll just volunteer. That's what I'm going to do.
Just a baby billionaire.
Yeah.
Little baby billionaire. Well, let me push back a little bit, or at least defend Elon a little bit, or talk about the other side of the coin here, because on the one hand, you do have a billionaire who looks like he's taking his ball and going home. I completely agree with what Chris is saying when it comes to this libertarian edge, and starting a third party is a disastrous idea. It'd be an enormous waste of money, and it'd be a waste of Elon's time and really power and position. So I agree with all that. And to some extent, the problem of Elon is that he's way smarter than his education, which seems to be, Ayn Rand and some libertarian cartoon politics, as well as reading science fiction novels. And he's much smarter than that and much more capable than that. But that pops out every so often. So I agree with you there. The problem is, though, on the other side of the coin, is that the politicos on the right need all the help they can get. Right. And when it comes to elite talent in tech, Elon as symbol stood for American industrialism, the golden age sort of mentality. And it signaled to a lot of other people who are in technology and in the business sector that, hey, it's okay to support Trump. That was enormously important to normalize that, because Elon was taking the heat. He didn't care. And it allowed a lot of other people to come forward. You saw this after the assassination attempt. So to go into the history here, my concern has always been on the other side of the coin with Elon. It was clear to me from the beginning he was going to ruffle a lot of feathers in that building, in the White House complex, because even people who are, vaguely pro-Elon, who are very pro-Trump and loyal to the president, their job, right, is set in a certain way according to the structure of the White House. And if you got a guy banging around, right, bebopping around the White House with that much power, it's going to upset even good people, right, who are going to say, hey, wait a minute, what the hell is with this guy? And we're the experts here after all. And it's sort of a little bit of both, right? Because DOGE was like this. I mean, he came in with DOGE. It took enormous powers. It freaked everybody in Washington out, Republicans as well as Democrats. Yet, I would say within it, there were the kernels of very good ideas and a very, very good stuff to sort of slow down the spending. And if people don't get grants on time, boo-hoo. So that was the tension that you saw. And when this came into the press, there's two people, names that would come up, would be Sergio Gore, who's done an excellent job as the head of PPO and finding people who are loyal to the president. I mean, if he has a fault, it's finding people who are too loyal or having too stringent, of a bar. But he's generally done a great job of finding people who are loyal, which is very different than last time. But it's apparent that there was a spat between them. Elon called him a snake at one point online. And the public version of this story is that the final straw was after Elon was already slated to leave. They got rid of his choice for NASA, right? And that really pissed him off. And this was all over the press and sort of a soap opera. But it is like, on Elon's side, it's like, I gave you a lot of money. You hired other former Democrats. This guy's a former Democrat. I didn't get my way. I'm upset. And so I would say, like, on the one side of the coin, okay, Elon takes his ball and goes home. On the other side, he got involved in some nasty politics within the White House, and there was tension between various people there who I think wanted him, away from the president. And so I would say what you lose by that, maybe you gain something. What you lose by that is potentially some of the efficient measures that DOGE put into place, the power of DOGE to actually rein in some of the spending, or at least give agency heads an eye on what money is going in and out, which they didn't really have a clear idea of coming as political appointees. And if that all goes away, that's a problem. The Washington Post on Friday just said grants.gov, where you post up the opportunities for everyone to go after grants. That used to be, you had to send everything in through DOGE, and they got rid of that. And that leaves it up to the department heads to see what money is coming in and out, which they really need to see. So, that's something valuable. And you also lose a bias towards action. And this doesn't work in government. I get that, right? But the fact that there was tension there and someone pushing for new ideas and biasing towards action, even if sometimes it needed to be reined back. Cabinet meeting in March, Trump famously said, look, the agency heads are in charge of this, the funding and hiring, firing, not DOGE employees. And Musk agreed and they had to rein some things back. But you lose that when you lose Elon, and that does concern me.
Yeah, and Elon was so good at messaging. It's something that the Republicans have been terrible at for so long. But the thing that he really got upset about was they were all talking about how they wanted to do the DOGE, and then they didn't do the cuts that actually needed to go through. But we see today, actually, the Senate did pass the budget reconciliation, and Vice President JD Vance had to go through and break the tie. Let's watch.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being evenly divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative. The bill as amended is passed.
All right, Chris. So where does the big, beautiful bill go from here? Are we going to make that July 4th deadline?
Well, it's tight. It's definitely a tight deadline. The House of Representatives is back in session in the morning to start their considerations. You see a lot of congressmen getting it out of their system, all their problems with this big, beautiful bill. At the end of the day, you've got something that cuts the deficit or cuts more spending than any bill in my lifetime, anything I can remember. It defunds Planned Parenthood. It does no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. It enshrines the Trump tax cuts. If that wasn't done, it would be the biggest tax hike in American history. It very importantly secures the border, which the president's been able to do right now, but he's done that with basically two rubber bands and a paperclip. Now this will give him the money necessary to continue with that. It funds the deportations, which you've seen Tom Homan and a crew going around trying to do everything they can, but people have rightly pointed out that these pale in comparison to what Eisenhower was able to do or what presidents in the 90s were able to do with deportations. That's because they haven't had the resources. This gives them that. These are the things that the president ran on. It's what he said he was going to do. It gets rid of electric vehicle subsidies. It cranks down on some of the Joe Biden energy subsidies, but not all of them. It still allows illegal immigrants to get Medicaid, which Democrats say is not happening, but they get really mad when you say it's going to go away. The Senate parliamentarian made that a 60-vote threshold, and every single Democrat in the Senate voted against it. It doesn't do everything that you want. There are still Obamacare subsidies that are in there. There's still problematic aspects, but this is by and large a great bill, an expensive one. That's the way Washington does everything. That's the reality of a small majority in Republican Senate and a small majority in the Republican House with a lot of people in there who just like to appropriate. So you take that incremental step and you move it along. And the House of Representatives is going to tweet, and they're going to be angry, and they're going to be liberal Republicans and conservative Republicans alike who take issue with this or that. But at the end of the day, there's only so many chairs, musical chairs, you can select when the tune stops, where you can vote no without actually being the person who tanks the bill. And that person who does tank the bill, it's no longer a protest vote. It's no longer a little tantrum in the corner. Now you've got the ire completely and totally of the president and his voters who asked for these things that are included in the bill and didn't actually give anybody a mandate for big fiscally conservative libertarian reforms to federal spending. So they put themselves out on a branch in a way that's really dangerous to them. There's a couple of them who can still vote no. You're not going to get a yes from Thomas Massey. Chip Roy might be able to get a seat this time, despite voting for it the first time out of necessity. I think those protest chairs will fill up, and I think the House of Representatives will end up passing this.
We know family farms keep shutting down. All that meat in the grocery store, it's coming from overseas. At least 85% of the so-called grass-fed beef on U.S. shelves is actually imported. That's why you need to get all your meat from GoodRanchers.com, because it's not just about buying meat. It's about supporting American ranchers and getting that top-tier quality and actually knowing where your food comes from. Good Rancher sells only meat that is 100% born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States, and you'll be able to taste the difference. We're just days away now from the 4th of July, so celebrate America's birthday with 100% American meat. And if you subscribe today, you can actually get your pick of free meat for life. You can choose from Wagyu burgers, hot dogs, bacon, or wings in every box for the lifetime of your subscription. Plus, when you use my code Jill at checkout, you'll get an extra $40 off. So visit goodranchers.com to shop American meat that you can trust. Use that promo code Jill. Goodranchers.com, code Jill. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered. Well, one of the things that we are definitely thankful for is that one of the biggest wins of DOGE was gutting USAID. I think that everybody here was like, okay, this is what we needed to see. Now, Bono had a different reaction. There was a headline today that I was like, once I saw this, you guys, I knew we absolutely had to talk about this. The headline is Bush, Obama, and a tearful Bono fault Trump's gutting of USAID on agency's last day. Bono was apparently reading a poem, you guys, and saying how sad he was to go through and see that USAID was no longer funded, Matt.
Yeah, well, Bono is a symbol of basically the old world that has passed away. So he's a symbol of a time where people thought all these global programs were charities and all for the good. And, airdropping condoms in Africa would somehow affect regime change. I mean, this is an old, he's old, he's washed up, but he is the symbol of all that stuff. And so him crying is really the perfect image for USAID. But I think for a lot of people, a rising tide of people, they look at this and say, good riddance. We're paying for our own destruction here. We're paying for all kinds of stuff that's ridiculous and that doesn't make any sense anymore. And you can see the two sides, right? There's one side that go, yes, Bono's crying, and people will die because we're not spending USAID money. And the other side, there's people who say, I don't care at all. I'm so glad, so thankful that we're getting rid of this crap.
Chris, I want to just re-go over some of USAID's greatest hits, right? We're spending $20 million on Sesame Street in Iraq, $43 million for a gas station in Afghanistan, described as the world's most expensive, $102 million on democracy, gender, rights programming in Afghanistan, some of it potentially funding the Taliban itself, and $335 million for unused diesel fuel in an Afghan power plant. And yet, Bono tearfully read a poem today because, how could we ever get rid of such a thing?
Joshua Tree is one of the greatest albums of all time. And I love Bono and the fact that he's put Christian messaging through music, rock and roll music that people barely even notice unless they're paying attention, puts on a good show. But the thing about being on the world stage long enough is no matter who you are, you eventually become a caricature of yourself. And that is what Bono has become on this. I think he probably looks at the different work that people have done, especially George W. Bush and his storied friendship with him over some of the AIDS relief, and thinks, USAID, this is the good, positive hand. This is what a lot of people, I think a lot of normal folks, a lot of folks on the outside, I think a lot of folks in D.C., assumed that USAID was largely doing that good charitable work, and that some of it has been very excellent. But the problem is, and we've discovered this through DOGE and through the technologies they've used to trace the grants, is that it turns out that a huge amount of the left-wing nonprofit sphere that was systematically working to dismantle Western freedoms, to turn more things gay, to attack Christianity, to promote abortion, people just assumed that money was coming from Soros or this billionaire or that shady billionaire, that shady billionaire. It turns out it was coming from you and me. It was coming from our taxes on tips. It was coming from our taxes on overtime. It was coming from the taxes that we paid on our income. That was being funneled to left-wing groups that, while some of them were doing good work, a lot of them were doing terrible work. To look at the AIDS program, for example, now they're focused instead more specifically, not simply on prevention, because AIDS prevention research was funneled into drag shows and condoms and abortion and work with sex workers. This stuff is instead focusing on taking care of people who are ill, providing aid to countries and medical facilities. paying for pharmaceuticals and other things that make it from a death sentence like it was 30 years ago into something that can be managed and lived with and can be contained and controlled. That seems like a better use of American taxpayer dollars than funding the left-wing nonprofit regime that has worked so hard across Europe, South America, Central America, United States, Asia, to spread this absolute and total crap. And it needed to end. So I love the guy, but the leather jacket, the tears, the poetry, it's just, you're kind of a comic of yourself now.
It's so hard for rock stars to age gracefully.
I know.
You know, like you said about the world stage,
I feel
especially
it.
in rock. And the thing about you too,
You're a rock star.
Look,
You're
I mean,
right.
I know. It happens to us all in little ways. I don't want to admit that either, but you have to say about you two. You know, don't get me wrong. I think they were great. I even liked Achtung Baby in 1991. You know, she moves in mysterious ways, but all good. And they were kind of the last rock-ish band when everything went, you know, alternative. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, like they stayed around, they pull a crowd for a reason. But hey, now look, they're in Vegas, and now they are indeed a caricature.
All right, we'll have more on Bono later in the show, but the biggest loser is going to be the deep state. USAID funding, sorry, not there anymore. You're going to have to go through and find a different way to fund all of your deep state projects. Chris Bedford, thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you then.
All right, don't go anywhere. Are you a hawk? Are you a dove? We'll get into it all right after this. We know that some bourbons out there, they chase trends, but Flying Ace chases legacy. That's why this is straight bourbon the way that it was meant to be. It's bold and balanced and unapologetically American. There's no gimmicks. It's just real whiskey made for people who still believe in hard work and high standards and doing things the right way. So whether you're winding down after a very long day, raise a glass with good company. Flying Ace delivers every single time. It's not about hype with them. It's all about heritage, and it's about getting back to what bourbon was always supposed to be. If it sounds like you're kind of poor, then it's time to level up. Go buy online at flyingacespirits.com. Use code BLAZE for free shipping. President Trump has racked up a remarkable string of victories over the last week, including defusing what looked like the opening act to World War III between Israel and Iran. Daniel McCarthy, he's the editor of Modern Age Journal, and he joins us now to unpack how Trump's bold move caught both critics and allies off guard. So Daniel, thanks so much for joining us. So how did Trump manage to find a third way, right? It's not just the isolationists. It's not just the interventionists. He said, you know what? I'm going to pave a different path. How was he able to do that?
Well, the remarkable thing is that Donald Trump was actually true to all of the things he had said on the campaign trail. He was true to his own record in his first term, and yet everyone was still surprised. So President Trump is willing to use force in small amounts in order to get the results that need to be achieved, but he doesn't get us involved in ongoing endless wars, open-ended conflicts abroad. He uses just enough force to resolve the crisis at hand. And he had done that successfully in the first term, and now he's done it even more successfully with this intervention, this bombing of Iran, which has really, done a tremendous amount of damage to their nuclear program. And more importantly, it's taught them a lesson that if they restart a nuclear program, they will face all kinds of difficulty and, to use Trump's phrase, fire and fury in the future. So I think it's a very powerful disincentive to them to continue causing this kind of mischief.
Dan, it's great to have you here on the show. It's been too long. I think this was remarkable in many ways, and your piece in Compact, which people should go read, is a great short case article for how this happened. Could you say a little bit for our audience about these two camps and how they exist in tension today within and without the administration?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, the Make America Great movement and in general the movement that's supporting Donald Trump has a lot of different elements to it. And there are some folks who are always looking for kind of the most dramatic possible scenario in the world. They have a kind of penchant for apocalypticism. And that's true of both some of the hawks who are interventionists and want a very militant foreign policy. And it's also true of certain doves who want to have, a foreign policy of doing very little or practically nothing in the world. Both of them tend to imagine worst-case scenarios. On the one hand, worst-case scenarios coming from foreign powers that might be trying to attack us or otherwise harm us. And in the case of the Doves, it's the worst-case scenario where they are afraid that if we do absolutely anything at all, it will provoke a hornet's nest of resistance against us and cause us to get enmeshed in a conflict similar to the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War that'll just last decades. And Donald Trump basically was able to tell the ideologues on both sides that that's not what he was going to do. He was simply going to use force in a measured manner in order to obtain peace and get rid of a nuclear program that was a danger to its entire region.
So what's the lay of the land there now in D.C.? The response, the fallout after, Donald Trump went his own way. He didn't follow either camp. What's going on right now in D.C.?
Yeah, there are people who have sour grapes. They wish that Trump had done exactly what they wanted. Some folks actually wanted to have a more prolonged military engagement because that's the kind of thing they live for. It's the kind of thing they enjoyed having during the days of the Iraq War and the Afghan War. And then there are others who are so dovish that they believe that even an effective strike that takes out an enemy's nuclear capacity is something that goes beyond the limits of the most strict possible libertarian approach to foreign policy, and therefore they're unhappy with that. But I think those wings are both outliers, and most supporters of Donald Trump are very happy, actually, with the fact that, first of all, that we stopped a nuclear program that was quite dangerous, but even more so that we were able to stop it very effectively with a single strike, and that has called off basically what had been a 12-day war between Israel and Iran. I mean, just think about, how effective Donald Trump has been in creating peace where there had been a situation of war beforehand.
Yeah, and what strikes me is, as you say, he doesn't follow a fixed rule. He just does what he thinks is best at the time. And that actually strikes a chord with many of us as similar to what people in Western political thought have said for thousands of years about the virtue of prudence, which is doing the right thing in the right situation, which varies depending on the situation. Can you say more about that? Because if he keeps on doing that, I would guess that you would have a sort of new a new realism, a new foreign policy sort of birthed from a series of those actions.
I think that's what we see emerging here. For a long time, at least for 20 years or more, America has tended to follow a foreign policy that is defined by utopianism and by certain ideological objectives, such as regime change and nation building abroad, which have really been very extravagant and have not had a good grounding in realism and what can actually practically be done in the world. What we can practically do with our military force is use it to destroy enemy forces, whether those are an enemy nuclear program or whether it's an enemy army. But when it comes to actually changing the nature of another polity and trying to inculcate a different set of political values among its people, that's something that's been tried time and time again and has almost always failed. The one exception, in fact, kind of proves the rule. The fact that West Germany and Japan after World War II became pro-Western liberal democracies, that's owing not just to what the United States did, but to the fact that the Germans and the Japanese were looking at the fact that the Soviet Union had its eyes set on them and would have, been very happy to reconstruct Germany and Japan in a Soviet fashion, in a communist fashion, if the Japanese and the Germans did not choose to side with America instead. So they were facing a constrained choice, and that's why they made the choice they did. But in general, trying to transform other people's countries into a Switzerland in the Middle East or into a clone of the United States of America, that doesn't work very well at all, and it winds up getting us enmeshed in these kinds of nation-building wars which go on interminably.
If you go back to Donald Trump's first term, he's famous for not starting any new wars. Now, we all know the military-industrial complex, they're not going to go out quietly, right? So how do we see this playing out? Because as long as Donald Trump is in office, per our conversation that we're having here, I feel like at some point the military-industrial complex will just try and rise up in some way, shape, or form, right?
Maybe. I mean, the thing about the military-industrial complex is it wants to make a lot of weapons. It wants to make a lot of, ships and airplanes. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily quite as invested in ongoing wars as you might imagine. So as long as they're able to sell a lot of material, they're less concerned about whether that material is being used on the battlefield or not. the temptation is always that Congress will give in to military contracting that takes place in their own districts for the construction of new weapons programs, most of which will wind up being rather useless in an actual conflict. But nevertheless, that's kind of the worst side, or at least the ongoing danger that the military-industrial complex presents. It's not so much the military-industrial complex is always trying to get us directly into a war. Oftentimes, military contractors can be quite happy simply selling arms to the rest of the world, which in fact they're doing quite prolifically right now. And while that certainly is something that we need to be concerned about, it's quite different from the idea that they're going to lure us into another Iraq war or a Vietnam war or anything like that.
But you do point out, I think, quite well at the end here in a provocative fashion that we are entering a time that's going to be rocky no matter what. And I want to cite what you said here. You said, to put it bluntly, America cannot sustain the leadership it has exercised for the last 30-odd years, which demands global policing that's not compatible with national self-government. But the corollary to a necessary reduction in American global rule will be the exercise of leadership and initiative by many other states, including our friends. And so, in other words, as we step back and don't act as the tyrannical global hegemon, our friends and allies are more or less throughout the world are going to start taking action on their own. And this is what you saw Netanyahu do. And that presents a picture, as I read you, of trouble ahead, or at least a rocky road ahead as we sort of figure this out, because people are going to take action on their own, and then we're going to be struggling with whether to intervene or not. Is that an accurate picture?
Yeah, it's going to make some people uncomfortable because you're going to have other nations and other blocks of nations, whether it's Israel or the Europeans, taking action in their own neighborhoods in order to maintain the peace and create an order in which their democracies are able to survive. And up until now, the idea has been that America has to be the leader in all of this, that if we want to see a certain situation in the Middle East or in Europe, we have to get involved directly using our forces in a very large way in order to create that situation. Now we're getting into a different kind of strategy, a different picture, where Israel or the Europeans or others will be able to police their own neighborhoods. But that does mean that sometimes they will be policing their own neighborhoods and they might ask for the United States to help them out. And so there is this, bit of there's a mixed feeling among some non-interventionists and some who'd like us to have a more America-first foreign policy, because on the one hand, they do see the necessity to have our allies take care of their own neighborhoods to a greater extent. But then they also feel a certain nostalgia for the old days when America could tell an ally or could tell a number of allies, no, you're not allowed to do things. We're the global hegemon. We decide when there's going to be a war, and we decide how big it's going to be. Now, you can't have it both ways. So if you're going to give up the hegemonic power to decide when a war is going to start everywhere around the world, then you have to give a certain amount of leeway to your allies to take matters into their own hands. And that does entail some risk that, the United States might wind up having to supplement the force of its allies. But it also means that we are not constantly being the driver of conflicts, all around the world. And what we found really over the last 25 years is that efforts of the Clinton administration, the George W. Bush administration, the Barack Obama administration, Joe Biden, all of these different administrations, their efforts to stabilize things and to stop conflicts all around the world only wound up making greater instability and actually causing more chaos. So the more decentralized approach, the more federalist approach that Donald Trump is taking towards a global strategy is the right one, but it certainly does carry certain risks.
Well, there's one more fight that I want to ask you about before we let you go, Dan, because it started out on X in a big way. It's Elon and Trump. Right now, how do we get this coalition to get back together and everything under one MAGA sun again?
Well, I think the personalities involved are they're outsized, and therefore, it's not entirely surprising that someone who is has been, in fact, the world's richest man, and someone who's the most powerful man in the world as president of the United States, that they should have certain ego conflicts as well as philosophical conflicts. But I think that this is a case where voters and other people who are not at quite as high a level of status as either Elon Musk or Donald Trump. Nevertheless, there is a groundswell of belief among Americans who would like to see this country back on the right track, who don't want it to get distracted by conflicts, as to whether we're going far enough in the direction of, say, cutting government or far enough in the direction of some of the programs that perhaps President Trump supports. They really want to see, the best of both worlds, which is if we're going to have government programs at all, they need to be efficient. They need to be for citizens, not for illegal aliens. And everything that's extraneous, whether it's USAID or whether it's, any number of other programs, these things need to be cut rigorously. And Elon Musk made a great start on that, but now there's a need for Congress to follow through and do more. And there will be a continuing need for this administration over the next 3 years to continue to pare back and to try to stop this continual expansion of the government, of the administrative state that we've seen, going back really to the Franklin Roosevelt administration. So what I would caution basically all, folks out there who support the agenda of reducing the size of the government is simply don't be impatient. This monstrosity, this Leviathan was created over the course of decades. It's going to take a while in order to get it under control. Elon Musk has made a good start. Donald Trump is continuing to do excellent work, but there's going to be a lot more effort needed in the next several years here. And losing hope or getting into arguments with your allies is counterproductive.
That is very well said. Listen, if Donald Trump can go through and figure out how to drop a bomb on Iran and not start World War III, we can figure out Elon Musk and the friendship. I think that's safe to say. Daniel McCarthy, thanks so much for your time. Great stuff.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll have your replies. It's Bono, it's USAID, and there's a handful of tears coming your way next. Hey guys, real quick before we jump back in, I have something to tell you about, and it's only happening this week. At BlazeTV, we're officially calling this 4th of July No King's Day, because let's be honest, that's what the 4th of July really is. It's not just the fireworks and cookouts. It's the day where we rejected the idea of the monarchy, all the elites, and we said we'd be ruled by we the people. That's the spirit behind Independence Day. We didn't just break up with England. We actually went out and built something better. We built a constitutional republic. It's grounded in liberty and individual rights and God-given freedom. There's no kings, just self-governance and the rule of law. So right now, for the first time ever, you can get a 7-day free trial of BlazeTV. That means you have access to every show, every documentary. It's all completely free for 1 week. And it's your chance to celebrate the true freedom with us and support honest media and decide for yourself what's worth watching. So if you've ever thought about joining us at BlazeTV, this is your moment. There's no risk, no kings, just truth. So celebrate No King's Day the way the founders would have wanted, by choosing truth over tyranny. Go ahead and start your 7-day free trial right now at blazetv.com/BNT. That's blazetv.com/BNT. There's no promo code necessary. Just sign up for an account and start watching today and let freedom stream. You know it's a good day when Bono is crying over Trump and Elon. It's not because of their fallout, but it's because of what they did with DOGE. So I posted on X, tearful Bono is sad that Trump is cutting USAID funding. So what year do you think that Bono ceased being relevant? Now, Matt, we talked about this with Chris a little bit earlier today, but I think it's just, when I saw the story, I thought it was the funniest thing, right? Like USAID, we know it's now a front for the CIA and deep state funding, and there's just crap that's loaded in the USAID funding. And Bono is like crying over this.
Well, this is a lot of the libs out there, they really feel like these programs are saving people's lives. I mean, they literally think that's true. I had relatives and others say, this many millions of people will die because we're not sending this money out there. So there's just an enormous disconnect here. But this is the importance of DOGE. Like, that was really smart to go after that stuff because it was so bad and it had been so terrible for so long. And that was the bloodletting we needed to begin with. So I think that Bono's tears, a lot of people would be fine drinking them. They're okay with that. And again, this is the big symbol of the change.
Mark this day down. July 1st, it's going to go down in infamy, Bono's tears. Let's go ahead and get to your replies. We'll start with Heretic Dave. He said 1979, I should say. Bono's not that old. The year that he did his first political activity. This would be the year that he stopped being an entertainer and started becoming an influencer from the mic. It's pretty dead on there.
Well, I mean, technically, that's correct. Like, I think he was always into, activism from the beginning. But I think also, you could see where his heart was. I think he was likable. He was trying to do good. And as Chris mentioned earlier, his music was really remarkable. It had all these Christian references and images. They even have a psalm in one of the early albums. It was good stuff. And so it's good that people care about these things. I actually don't have a problem with artists necessarily being political. It's just that the way in which they do so is all one way, and they just go along with the Borg, and often that's fake, and that's for the sake of them getting notoriety. I think Bono actually does care about this stuff, or did care, but he's lost his way.
Sky Creates posted that Bono still does great work with his charity, to your point, Matt, but his peak influence is probably the mid-2000s. He says, speaking of relevance, Gavin Brooks-Swin always has a sharp take on pop culture. Wonder what he thinks. So I'm going to ask Matt what he thinks about this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think, great work with the charity. Peak influence, you're right. I mean, they really had a resurgence. They stayed around for a long time, and there was still energy about them. They were still regarded as relevant, and you'd want to go see them, even though they've been around for decades. And that was nothing short of remarkable. Very rare for a band to sort of ride the tide like that and stay relevant for that long. But that ship has sailed, and the fact that they are in Vegas, even if they are U2, so they are in the sphere. That speaks volumes. That speaks volumes.
And to round it out, Quiet Guy responded, "We all seem to have the same opinion, LOL. Any artist that makes regular trips to the World Economic Forum is highly suspect, in my view. Highly suspect, in my view, as well."
Yeah, look, there's two types of people here. One, they really want to do good, and they sort of get sucked into what good is, and the experts tell them, it's WEF, and we're trying to save the world, and they just kind of believe that stuff and go along with it. And then the other, which I believe that was Bono, he was a true believer, and the other side of it, right, you have people who just want to climb, and they just dance. They're the monkey dancing to whatever the masters of the world tell them to do. Like a lot of actors trying to get jobs by signaling, "I'm on your side. I'm very progressive." But we have to say this was the world we lived in for a long time. This was just mainstream thought, right? So when you ask, like, what should I do to do good with the world? They say, well, here's a list of charities, and here's how we're trying to save the world and climate change and this and that. But that is ending. Now, and we're in a new universe, and that's a good thing.
I absolutely love it. But, we look back and why can't we all just be friends, right? Well, to your point, the liberals ran everything, and we just kind of had to go along with Hollywood and the entertainers. And now we don't have to, right? I think this is a huge shift. We talked about it during the campaign. All of the NFL athletes and boxers and everybody were out there. They were doing the Trump dance, and pop culture started changing. And now we get to the point where, we have to talk about Bono and his tears for USAID. This is a good day.
Oh, yeah. And so you see the old order falling apart. And all it takes is for a few people with elite status to start saying, no, I'm not going to do everything the Borg wants me to do. And that's why it was so important when Elon said, I support Donald Trump. Look, this kind of stuff hadn't happened in decades, where you had billionaires supporting the renegade Republican. You're not supposed to do that. And showing people throughout, you see this happening more and more. It hasn't quite reached a tipping point, but it's gaining momentum, where people are saying, no, after the election, I will wear my MAGA hat, right, in Los Angeles. That's the kind of thing you really needed, because remember how tyrannical it was, right? It was crazy what we just went through. And thank God it's finally over.
Pride Month is over. Bono's tears are just beginning. But now we get to celebrate all the patriotic stuff. The 4th of July is right around the corner, and we can go ahead and we can start MAGA Month now, MP. We can start it.
Yes, it starts right now. Let's go.
Pride Month in the rearview mirror. MAGA Month just getting started. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Good times.